How to buy Bitcoin without buying Bitcoin. Hi, my name is Tom Porter, and in this video, I'm going to go over the ways that I'm familiar with to actually be an investor in Bitcoin without having to buy any Bitcoin. This question came up because somebody really wanted to be an investor in Bitcoin, but they just were like, it's too complicated. I can't figure it out. I don't want to have to know how to go to an exchange and buy it and then move it to a hardware wallet, all the technical stuff of having to buy these crypto assets. Pretty hardcore, right? Like you have to kind of know what you're doing to technically pull this off. So if you want to avoid that headache altogether, then this video is for you. The first way that I know of to invest in Bitcoin without actually having to own any Bitcoin is to buy shares of a company or an entity that has exposure to Bitcoin. Now, I know that sounds really self-explanatory, and it definitely is. But some of the things that you have to know if you're going to be a buyer of a company rather than actually owning the currency is you really need to understand what relationship your company has that you're an investor in. What exposure do they have to the currency? So how are they exposed to the currency? Because just because Bitcoin is going up in price doesn't mean that a company that has exposure to Bitcoin, it doesn't mean that those shares are necessarily going to increase in price. Sometimes it does, but it generally is up to the relationship that that company has to the currency. So you really need to understand in what way are they exposed to the currency. You are investing in a company in fiat. So whatever fiat you are using to buy and sell that company's shares with, you're basically holding that fiat. And I think this is what gets ignored a lot in the investment community is that if you have any fiat, if you have a bank account with any money in it, or if you have shares of a company that are bought and sold in a certain currency that's fiat, you're basically a currency trader. I mean, really, because that money, those assets, every single day they're going up and down in value relative to other currencies. And so whether you acknowledge it or not, you own fiat currency and you're technically a currency trader. So those are the two things to keep in mind if you're going to be investing in a company with a fiat that has exposure to Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency. The second way that I know of to invest in Bitcoin without actually having to own any Bitcoin is to buy a futures contract. Now, futures contracts are completely different than buying crypto or investing in a company. Completely different. And they're extremely dangerous. They're extremely risky. The reason why they're extremely risky is because you're combining the volatility that is crypto, which is one of the most volatile assets that you could possibly be an investor in today, with the leverage of a futures contract. When you combine volatility and leverage, you just have something that is extremely risky. You really need to know what you're doing when you're buying and selling a futures contract. At the very basic level, a futures contract it's an agreement between you and another person to buy or sell commodity at a future date for a specified price. Now, I know that sounds kind of confusing, and if you haven't wrapped your head around futures contracts, I would suggest that you don't start with the Bitcoin contract. That should not be the one that you get your feet wet in, because the margin requirements on the Bitcoin futures contracts are pretty high. I know at the time that I originally shot this video, the Bitcoin futures contract margin requirement was like $60,000. So that means for one contract, you either had to borrow $60,000 from your broker or you had to have $60,000 in your account just to play in the first place. I know for a lot of people that just completely knocks futures contracts off the table. There have been some lower margin requirement ones coming out. So I think there's one for $24,000 now, or at least it's dropped to that. And there's one for $6,000, which is just kind of starting, just in its infancy. So you can get away with participating in the futures market for a lower margin requirement. But you just have to remember, at its very basics, what you're doing is you're controlling an amount of Bitcoin on leverage, and you're doing that with one of the most volatile assets out there. Use caution. Even for people that are experienced, it can bite you. But on the flip side of that, there's money to be made by using futures contracts appropriately. So those are the two ways that I know of to invest in Bitcoin if you're not wanting to own the asset of Bitcoin itself. So I hope this helps. Thank you guys so much for subscribing to my channel. It means the world to me to see that you guys are getting value out of what I'm doing here. So everything on this channel has obviously been about crypto, but crypto is not my only passion. Just wanted to say that because you're gonna be seeing videos from me that aren't always crypto. But I just want to say thank you for being with me while I figure out my presence here on YouTube, kind of figure out what I want to do with it. And yeah, have a great day. Hope this helps.